Hello everyone, welcome to the 2020 BeFM Youth English Speaking Contest, the grand final round, hosted by BeFM Busan I'm your host, Daniel Shin. I will be a presenter for today's event. This year, BeFM has opened the 2020 BeFM Youth English Speaking Contest under the theme Climate Change and the Role of Us. With the high rate of climate change, it is important for all of us to think what we can do regardless of our age and our experience. For today's contest, 10 students have been selected for the grand final round. We would like to thank all of you for all your hard work up to this point. A bit about the event, we'll begin with the 5-minute presentations of each of the contestants, followed by a 7-minute Q&A session with our judges. Now, without further ado, let's begin the procedures for the grand final round. One of the judges will be Ms. An Hye-jin. She is the head of the WWF Korea Climate Energy Program. Also, another judge joining us is Professor Derek McGovern. He's a professor at Bugyeong National University. And our third judge is Ms. Catherine Bang. She's a professor at Dongju University, as well as a host of a program, Morning Wave, at BeFM. Thank you so much to all the judges joining us. Now, we're going to be starting our contest. I do want to let our contestants know of a slight change in terms of the warning bell. I know I played a warning bell for the students a couple minutes ago, but we've changed that because just in case some students won't be able to hear. At the 4-minute mark, I'll be giving, sorry, let me put that down, a slight clap. And at the 5-minute warning mark, I'll be clapping twice. So you know that you'll have 30 seconds to finish your presentation. So that's an update on the warning bell. Now it's going to be a warning clap. So our first contestant from Busan 외국인 High School, we have Elizabeth Kim. Elizabeth, are you ready?
Do I just begin when I'm ready?
Sure.
Okay.
Please begin.
Wildfires, droughts, insect outbreaks, and shrinking glaciers. These are all catastrophic effects of climate change. Because of global warming caused by climate change, many animals are dying and many parts of the earth are drying up and getting destroyed. Global temperatures are rising, glaciers are melting, and wildfires are burning every continent, yet people are not doing anything about it. Everyone talks about change, but no significant action is being made. The US still denies accepting carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas to please the giant fossil fuel-reliant industries. As China keeps fueling its factories, emitting 10.06 billion metric tons of CO2. To put that into perspective, that is enough to cover the entire sky of Songpagu. Another example of an effect of climate change is glaciers melting. Due to global warming and climate change, the Arctic is warming twice faster to threaten the polar bear's food and life. These changes and heartbreaking effects are conspicuous, yet some people still ignore this fact and act as if this does not affect us. This is our Earth, and together we must make changes. So, what do we need to compel action? First, people must have accurate information on what is going on throughout the world. For example, wildfires in Australia are killing millions of animals and putting many species into extinction because global warming is making the atmosphere drier and prone to wildfires. According to NBCnews.com, the Australian wildfires were declared one of the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. Nearly 3 billion animals were affected. Not only were they killed, but their habitats were destroyed as well. It started as a small wildfire caused by human neglect, but it became the size it is right now because for a few years, the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, led anti-conservist policies for growing the Australian economy. What people grossly misunderstand is that to spur the economy, there needs to be environmental trade-off. Yes, this was true centuries ago with the Industrial Revolution, but now, with more green technology and an increasingly digitized world, the same dogma does not stand. People need to understand that it is no longer impossible to create jobs and develop the economy in more green and environmentally conscious ways. Another important misconception that people have is that the consequence of their actions wanes in comparison to the decisions made at the top of the state and industry level. However, we can no longer harbor this kind of defeated mindset. It is most important to know that individual choices, when collected and amassed, become big and powerful. For example, your decision to drive cars are the top 3 contributors to global warming. Also, your decision to mindlessly use disposable cups at and from cafes make mountains of pollution just from Seattle alone. We cannot wait for someone else in the government to make macro changes. Macro change will only come after individual changes. Only then will people with high decision-making power be influenced to rectify this kind of problems around the world and create major environmental movements. Then, what can you do? Start small. Use environment-friendly products such as metal tumblers, paper straws, and recycled products. Be aware that your preference for a little more convenience creates devastating and deleterious effects on the earth. Being lazy equals more plastic bags and disposable food containers that end up in our landfills and the oceans. But if one person becomes environmentally friendly by recycling and reusing, this could create a ripple effect and have many others do the same. Little things such as turning the lights off after using it, turning the water faucet off, not using disposable products, and not littering can help this crisis. Climate changes such as global warmings are caused by human activities such as farming and deforestation as well. Not only do they melt the glaciers, it can mess up the length of seasons and even alter the range of infectious diseases. It causes natural disasters such as storms, droughts, and rising sea levels. It doesn't only affect the animals, this is also a huge threat to human beings. Climate change will create a chain effect because if global warming kills many animals, this will threaten humans' food supplies and ruin the food chain as well. Finding solutions to these problems will be a starting place for creating jobs and creating a new market. If we don't do anything now, global warming will most likely consume all of us. No one is too small or big to create change. Drop your cups, get out early and take the bus or subway, and be conscious about your pollution footsteps. And be ready for a little inconvenience to save the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Once again, our first contestant, Elizabeth Kim from Busan Waeguk인 High School. Now we're going to be beginning our Q&A session with our judges. Our judges are going to have the floor for the next 7 minutes to have this session with Elizabeth. Please begin, judges.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can go first as we will have a round of questions. You mentioned about the accurate information and actions in daily life. It would be great to hear like what you try in daily life to walk the talk.
So in my daily life, this is what I think everyone should be able to do, but it is crucial to turn off the lights and the water faucet off when people are not using it. The electricity, water, and supplies shouldn't be wasted because this is also another huge contributor to what is affecting the climate change. So I think that people should take out the plugs of the electricity if they are not using it, and that people should try to use environmentally friendly products such as paper straws and their own personal metal tumblers, which I use as well. And I think that people should try to recycle and throw their, not litter and throw their trash and like recycle because it is better for the environment.
I'll be next. This is Catherine for Elizabeth. So what do you say to underdeveloped countries who might not have the resources, for example, to, in line with your thinking, to go along with some of these changes that you speak about in daily life? Maybe they don't have choices due to their economic situation.
So could you clarify your question, please? Because
for example, in certain countries, they might not have public transportation. They might not have a choice in terms of what mode of transportation that they take. So do you have a suggestion as to what could be some viable options for people in, say, poor countries where there isn't proper infrastructure in terms of transportation?
I believe that these climate changes are not based. So most of these climate changes are from the more developed countries because that is where they have more electricity and they have a larger scale of transportation to choose from. So I think that the poorer countries, if they do not have a choice of transportation, then the underdeveloped countries will ride bicycles or will be able to walk, because if they do not have access to this technology, I think that this leads to them producing less waste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth. Derek McGovern here. What would you say to Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, if you had the opportunity to talk with him about his environmental policies?
So Scott Morrison led anti-conservist policies for growing the Australian economy. So I would like to speak to him about the importance of the environment and how his actions and decisions are affecting the environment. Not only for his not only what he thinks is important. I would like to show him that this is actually creating a huge difference on Australia and how badly his actions have been affecting his country.
Thank you.
Thank you. To follow up the questions addressed before, what would you say to have more collaborative actions between the countries, like in developing countries and developed countries, to tackle this climate change? As an individual, as a citizen, what can you do?
So as an individual, what can every individual do to reduce climate change?
To help the countries work together, because it's a global challenge and it affects every country, and especially those who are vulnerable to the climate change.
So there can be many ways that people can contribute to making this global problem come together. And some examples are people could raise awareness around their environments, like at school, or they can make their small, even if it's a small organization. I believe that people can raise awareness by creating these organizations and showing not only their country, but they could also spread this to their to other countries, because this is, like you have mentioned, a global problem.
Yeah.
Okay, Elizabeth, for my next question, I'm going to make it a little bit more, I guess, real or practical. So let's say you have a friend who doesn't, I guess, share in your thinking about climate change and global warming. So assuming that it's a she, what if, for example, she leaves the tap on, while she's brushing her teeth? She uses plastic straws and, litters and things like that. So what would you say to this hypothetical friend in trying to convince her that your line of thinking is correct?
Of course, it is not possible for everyone to all of a sudden just drop all plastic and not using these cars and paper straws, because we have to admit that plastic is a very important factor to our life, and it is making a lot of people's life easier. However, I would tell her and show her there are lots of documentaries of how her using plastic straws too much and not saving how this could affect the earth in a very bad way. And there are not only words, but there are also pictures showing how much this is affecting the earth. So I think that I would tell her what she's doing and what could be the effects of her actions by showing her documentaries and videos and trying to convince her that what if one person could make a huge difference, so she should help in trying to make the environment better.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to wrap up our Q&A session with Elizabeth here. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your presentation. Up next is our student contestant Im Young-hyun from Samlangjin Middle School from Miryang. Let's see, Young-hyun, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, you may begin.
Okay. Sir David Attenborough, a respected natural historian, said, "Are we happy to suppose that our grandchildren may never be able to see an elephant except in a picture book?" He highlights the seriousness of today's climate crisis and the consequences that can follow if we do not act quickly. There are several actions that we should take to prevent the end of our kind. We must divest from fossil fuels, restore the lost biodiversity of our planet, and on a more individual level, we must reduce our meat consumption. Investing in renewable energies like solar, wind, and hydro energy is one of the most important actions to take to stop global warming. A study showed that 85% of CO2 emission should be reduced to keep the temperature rise below 2 Celsius degrees, which is a critical threshold point for our planet. Global average temperature would rise by 4 Celsius degrees if we were to continue to extract fossil fuels at the same rate. For fossil fuel companies, the transition to renewable energy can help their economical growth. A report showed that the transition can create 26 million jobs, which are more jobs than those lost from the fossil fuel industry. The energy shift makes sense economically, and it can also play a major role in making sure our planet does not go over the point of no return. Besides transitioning to using renewable resources, we should also work towards restoring our lost biodiversity. Because of the rise in temperature, there has been a significant loss of ecosystems, which endangers the food security of our local communities. For example, our ocean has always been important for storing carbon and as a source of food. An efficient management of marine ecosystems can help us fight the loss of rapidly disappearing diversities. A report suggested that no fishing zones to a third of the ocean can help us fight the loss of marine ecosystems. The success of this can be seen through the actions of the country of Palau. When their fish stocks started getting depleted, the government restricted fishing practices in selected areas to protect the fishing population. Soon the population came back to normal in these no fishing zones and also spilled out into other areas. Although the most important actions must come from more powerful communities like the government and companies, we can also individually add our efforts in the fight against climate change by minimizing our meat and dairy intake. Meat and dairy farming is responsible for 15% of global greenhouse gas emission and a leading cause of deforestation. An analysis shows that by 2050, plant-based diets can help counteract 4.5 billion tons of CO2 a year. We can make a head start by making sure our planet does not go over the point of no return by adopting a diet that does not rely on meat as a primary source of protein, like vegetarian, flexitarian, or pescatarian diets. The essay explored the different ways that both communities and individuals can fight climate change, investing in renewable resources, restoring our biodiversity, and reducing our meat and dairy consumption. Sir David Attenborough has this powerful message in his documentary Blue Planet. The future of our species, and indeed all life on Earth, now depends on us. Necessary sacrifices must be made to save the future of our planet, and we must urge our local communities to take a stance in the fight against climate change for the future of our species. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our student, once again, contestant Im Young-hyun. Now we're going to be beginning our Q&A session with our judges. So judges, you have the floor.
Sure. I'll jump in here. Thank you very much, Young-hyun.
You're welcome.
Can you tell me what sacrifices have you personally made in your own private life? You mentioned David Attenborough saying that personal sacrifices would be necessary. Can you just give us some examples of what you've done in your own life, or what you would like to do in your own life to help climate change?
In my daily life, I try to turn off the lights I'm not using, and I try to use less water while I shower. But I don't do those actions a lot in my daily life.
If I can just jump in there and ask you a second one, then what would you say? How would you persuade meat eaters or fans of dairy products to switch to a more plant-based diet? Because I see that would be quite difficult to do.
Well, it would be difficult to make them not eat meat entirely, but I could try to persuade them to eat less meat by showing them the consequences that can follow if we eat meat and dairy products too much.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I need you to clarify, because you talked about, you used the term renewable resources, renewable energy quite a bit. So give us some examples.
Some examples are solar energy, and there's also wind and hydro energy.
Thank you, Yang. My question is, you pointed out two important systems that needs to be changed, food and energy, and especially when it comes to food production, you described the fishing in a more sustainable way. So I was wondering, as a consumer, what can you do about for companies to change their to more sustainable way to produce fish, for example?
We could try to raise awareness about the issue by we could just try to raise awareness about the subject.
What would you like to ask David Attenborough about this topic? Is there anything that you would be particularly interested in asking him, since he has spoken so often about it?
I'd like to ask him about how the Earth was before. I'd like to ask him about how the Earth was when he was young, because I want to hear how daily life might have been when the Earth wasn't so polluted.
Good. Thank you.
In terms of daily life actions, I wonder if you ever tried to change your diet or like reducing meat consumption.
Yes, I tried to reduce my meat consumption by eating less meat.
And any difficulties in doing so?
Well, it is difficult to eat less meat, but thinking about the consequences that it can bring, it wasn't that hard.
If there are no more questions from the judges, I think we'll wrap up our Q&A session with our contestant Im Younghyun. Younghyun, thank you so much. Moving on, we're going to be moving on to our next contestant from Yongwon Middle School in Changwon City. We have Park Yeseo. Yeseo, are you ready?
Yes.
So when you're ready, you may begin.
Have you thought about climate change earnestly? I am going to tell you about climate change and how we should approach this problem. First, we need to recognize that current situation tells us what is happening on Earth is not normal. Naturally, the temperature should maintain and the climate needs to be changed. But in nowadays, the climate is maintained and the temperature is changing. Natural disasters such as monsoon rains and hurricanes occurred worldwide. In South Korea, there was a monsoon season for 54 days, and in Australia, there was a forest fire for 6 months. Because of this, they lost 14% of their forest and 1 billion lives. Moreover, so far, the average temperature of Earth rose to 0.5 degrees Celsius. According to NASA, if the temperature reaches 2 more degrees Celsius, more than 70% of Earth's coastlines will see sea level rise greater than 0.2 meters. Then, how do we prevent it before the worst things happen? The first thing we can do is spending less time watching YouTube and Netflix. Did you know video streaming causes carbon dioxide? Moreover, so far, the average temperature of Earth rose to 0.5 degrees Celsius. According to NASA, if the temperature reaches 2 more degrees Celsius, more than 70% of Earth's coastlines will see sea levels rise greater than 0.2 meters. Then, how do we prevent it before the worst things happen? The first thing we can do is spending less time watching YouTube and Netflix. Did you know video streaming causes carbon dioxide? According to Greener UK, watching Netflix for 30 minutes makes the same carbon footprint as car driving 200 meters. These video streaming services have been a leading contributor to greenhouse gas emissions because of the data center, which store and transmit the data line, use a lot of energy to keep a constant temperature. The second way is eating local food rather than imported food. Eating local food can reduce the carbon emissions since they use local ingredients to minimize packaging and delivery. According to Science Daily, the amount of carbon produced in food import, distribution, and cooking is the same as producing 1.7 million cars in a year. In other words, 20 to 30% of Earth's coastline of world's greenhouse gas emissions are coming from producing, refrigerating, cooking, and food waste. Lastly, we need to reduce the time we spend in the shower and the lights on. If 15 million people reduce their shower time by 1 minute, this will reduce 30 million kilograms of carbon dioxide. If 10 million houses turn off 15 lights for 1 hour per day, about 74 million kilograms of carbon dioxide can be reduced. These actions that we can take could be significant for protecting forests about 120 times of size of Seoul's. However, there are many other ways to stop climate change, such as unplugging the cord when I use an electrical appliance. Every human being on Earth has the responsibility to preserve our safe and sustainable Earth. 242 companies, such as Apple, Google, and Facebook, are attending the RE100 campaign, which is a campaign replacing with the finite resources with renewable energy. But currently, there is no Korean company. I hope our country's company participates in this campaign some days, and in Australia, and save the earth together. Vincent van Gogh, a legendary artist, quoted, "Great things are not done by employees, but by a series of small things brought together." Like he said, one small action won't change much, but if those small actions gather as a whole, we can accomplish the mission of saving the earth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Yeso, for your presentation. And now we will begin our Q&A session with our judges. Judges, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Yeso. There are a lot of skeptics about climate change out in the world, and a lot of people are either tired of being told about what they should be doing about climate change, or they don't believe it. People such as Donald Trump, for example. What would you say to people who are skeptical about the effects of climate change? How would you try to persuade them that climate change is actually real?
I will tell them that climate change is very serious. In Earth is getting hotter and weaker, and I will persuade them to just to do some simple things, such as turn off the lights when you do not use an electrical appliance, or not spending much time in the shower time. Yes.
You mentioned Netflix and YouTube, for example, that people, how would you be able to persuade people not to use Netflix?
Many people want to see the YouTube and Netflix, but it is easy to reduce the time spent in YouTube and Netflix for our Earth. Earth is more important in our lives. It is for our lives and your lives. I think it is okay to reduce some times to watching Netflix and YouTube.
Thank you.
May I go next? I was going to ask a similar question to Professor McGovern. So to follow up on the whole YouTube or streaming services that are used, especially by youth, by people your age, it's very popular among young people. So what are some alternatives that people your age could turn to instead of spending a lot of time on things like YouTube, streaming services, just spending a huge amount of time online, with all the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and all that?
In my age, we use a lot of things in our phones and rely on phones. But when you go to schools or classes, we are not using that much of phones. So, and in few free time, we have to increase the talking or playing something instead of watching YouTube or Netflix.
Right, and then one additional question. Towards the end of your talk, you mentioned that you hope or you wish that Korea can turn toward renewable energy more. You touched upon it briefly, but I'm curious as to your opinion. How can Korea make a stronger move toward renewable energy?
In countries, they can make some campaigns that all people can participate, and in individual company, they can attend some campaigns that they can do something good for Earth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yesa. You introduced the campaign called RE100, globally happening, and you mentioned that there are more than 200 companies joining the campaign, which is to commit to transit their renewable energy, electricity consumption into renewable energy source. But why do you think the companies are participating in such a campaign?
There are hard things to countries do something, and in our lives to do something for good to our earth. But in companies helps to good things to go to earth. And our people can join in that campaign.
Just as a follow-up question, because companies they are pursuing profits at the most. In that logic, do you think it'll be related to having continuously good profits, but also contributing to mitigate climate change?
Okay. I think Earth is more important than our profit or company's profit, and companies who participate in this campaign will think the Earth is worth than our money. So I think the companies will participate in this campaign for Earth and our people's lives.
And we'll conclude our question Q&A session with our contestant Park Yes-ho from Yongwon Middle School. Yes-ho, thank you so much. Moving on to our next contestant from Changwon's Dongjin Girls Middle School, we have Kim Tae-yoon. Tae-yoon, are you ready?
Okay.
And you may begin.
Smartphones have become such an integral part of our everyday lives. As a matter of fact, a life without one is almost unimaginable. Unfortunately, despite the wondrous things this innovation has done for us, there is a dilemma about whether a smartphone is harming our environment. In this essay, we will explore how exactly the smartphone is harming our environment and what we can do to minimize its harmful effects. The main way that smartphones are harming our environment is through an increase in our digital carbon footprint, which refers to the amounts of carbon dioxide emitted in the process of connecting to servers through networks such as Wi-Fi and LTE from digital devices. People may think that the negative environmental effects of using a smartphone is negligible. However, research shows that we generate a digital carbon footprint of 1 gram per 10 minutes of video viewing and 4 grams per email. The good news is that there are simple practices that we adopt in our everyday lives to minimize our digital carbon footprint and help the environment. First, let's cut back on streaming. Smartphones have made streaming sites and apps like YouTube and Netflix very accessible, such that we can watch videos on those platforms almost anywhere and everywhere. Sadly, a huge amount of bandwidth is required to play these videos. Here's how environmentally harmful it is. If you watch a video for an hour, it's equivalent to driving a kilometer by a car. The good news is that there is a way to reduce our carbon footprint. When using your smartphone, reduce the resolution of your videos when you watch them, as it can help reduce data usage and energy. Another way is to download a video in advance if it is hard to reduce video playback time. Hence, cutting back on streaming video is one way to help the environment. Second, let's reduce the frequency in which we place our smartphones. The performance of smartphone is improving day by day. and an increasing number of people are replacing their smartphones even before the end of the phone's useful life. The problem with replacing our smartphone is we are fueling the production of even more smartphones. This is environmentally harmful because the amounts of carbon emitted when producing a single smartphone is equal to the amounts of carbon produced when the smartphone has been used for about 10 years. Therefore, dealing replacement of electronic devices as much as possible is the way to reduce carbon footprint. Lastly, emptying your email archive with your smartphone can help the environment. It is said that 4 grams of carbon dioxide is generated from a single email. Emails that are inadvertently left unattended are stacked in the data center, which uses a huge amount of electricity to create storage space. If the world population of 2.3 billion, we can erase 10 emails. We would save 1,725,000 of storage. Thus, eliminating unnecessary emails can prevent carbon dioxide emissions. In conclusion, smartphones are undoubtedly contributing to the demise of our environment by increasing our digital carbon footprint. Luckily, there are ways that we can alleviate these harmful effects. Cutting back on streaming, reduce the frequency in which we replace our smartphones, and emptying your email archive are just a few of the ways. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Once again, Kim Tae-eun from Dongjin Girls Middle School. Thank you for your presentation. Now we're going to hand it off over to our judges for questions.
May I go first?
Sure.
Okay, for Tae-eun, I'd like to ask, on a personal level, how much time do you spend viewing YouTube or Netflix per week?
Actually, I watched YouTube and Netflix yesterday too, but when I saw this essay from the neighbor or Google, I find out the Netflix and YouTube is really dangerous to the environment. So I have a plan to stop to watch Netflix and YouTube on maybe 7 hours on the weekend.
Well, what about your friends? I'm sure that many of your friends are very into YouTube or Netflix. It's a very popular thing among all ages. So how would you also convince your friends, your peers around you, to cut back on streaming?
I will tell them about this essay. The streaming is really bad to the environment, so they will know the earth is really bad now and the environment is getting worse. So if I tell them, I think they will know they need to stop to watch Netflix and YouTube.
Thank you.
I go next.
Sure.
Thank you, Tae-eun. You mentioned about digital footprint, and I was wondering, like, how would you compare, like, I don't know if you are familiar with the time that we didn't have emails and all the things were done by papers, and I'm sure it also affect environment. How would you imagine like emails versus papers impact on, let's say, climate?
I think emails for paper is also bad to the environment, but in this announcement, I said when I sent an email to another person, then he will got it, then he read it first, and after that, he will not see it one more time. If it is not special email, then he need to delete it, I mean.
So you're saying that if we adjust like how we manage our email inbox, it'll be much better in terms of affecting the environment. Using emails, it's better than papers.
No, it's actually not. I think in the digital email is better than paper, but paper is also not for the environment, but I think digital email is better than paper and email.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taeyun. You've certainly made me feel very, very guilty about emails. What do you think we should be doing about cell phones, for example, or smartphones in schools, for example? Do you think that schools should have a policy of making people turn off their cell phones while they're in school in order to prevent things like streaming, secret streaming, or just using their smartphones?
In the school, actually, in my school, we cannot use smartphone in school. So I think in this country, Korea, need to make a rule like one person can streaming only, like example, 5 hours like this, then it can help the environment.
Do you think the government should be stepping in and making laws about things like resolution, for example, that reducing the resolution on smartphones, things like that?
I think make a rule is really hard, but if this country need to help, the environment is getting better, but I mean, if my friends and students trying to streaming less, then I think government is helped us to make a rule.
All right, so that's going to conclude our Q&A session with our contestant Kim Taeyun from Dongjin Girls Middle School in Changwon. Taeyun, thank you so much. Continuing on, our next contestant from Tongyang Middle School in the Tongyang region, we have Jang Jung-uk. Jung-uk, are you ready?
Yes.
You may begin.
These days, all kinds of disasters are happening on Earth right now. The extinction of mankind is just around the corner because of global warming and ozone depletion. Our thoughtless behavior and lack of knowledge about the needs of our planet is dangerous. We need to be informed to keep ourselves and our planet safe, and we must do so by doing our best to protect it. One of the ways that we can do that is through the reduction of reckless dumping. Garbage pollution endangers our land and our seas, and it also harms plants and animals. To avoid the destruction of our land and marine ecosystems, we need to stop using disposable products and switch to recyclables instead. Along with garbage pollution, plastic pollution has also become one of the most concerning environmental issues we are facing today. Plastic pollution is rapidly growing in developing nations in Africa and Asia, where millions of animals are killed. Marine wildlife such as whales, fishes, and turtles consume plastic and they die because of suffocation and indigestion. The constant use of transportation is also weakening our planet due to gas emission, which plays a major role in global warming. If we continue with this path, economic losses will increase and the risk of destroying the Earth completely will be higher. We can prevent this situation from getting worse if we make conscious choices, such as walking or riding our bikes instead of using cars if we are traveling short distances. Though these actions seem small, they're important in sustaining our environment. Forest fires are also common as the earth continues to heat up. If this heat wave resumes, more land and much of our wildlife will burn. One of the prime examples of this tragedy is the Amazon rainforest nearing extinction due to preventable forest fires. To protect the trees and the animals within our forest, we must recycle the paper instead. The use of recycled paper is the safest and greenest option because it uses less energy, produces lower carbon emissions, and water. Recycling 1 ton of paper can save 17 trees, and paper can be recycled up to 7 times before it must be thrown away. These are just some of the many environmental problems we are facing today, along with simple solutions that we can apply to solve them. In the end, we must do these things not only for our planet, but for ourselves and for our loved ones. We can create a better future for our children by making the effort to care for our planet more. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A session with our judges. For our contestant, Jungwook, judges, you have the floor.
May I go first? Is that okay? Okay, so I have a question for you. In terms of, you mentioned, the Amazon rainforest, and of course, a part of it is in Brazil. So what would you say to a leader like Jair Bolsonaro, who is the president of the leader of Brazil, who insists that it is, the right of the Brazilian government to continue with deforestation?
We don't have smoking with in mountain. And we don't make a fire around the Amazon forest.
Okay.
Thank you, Jungwook. You described several environmental problems, not only climate, but like oceans pollutions. Can you explain your understanding about the if we are continuing to polluting our oceans, what would happen?
People is likely dumping due to fishes and whales or sharks consume the plastic, and many trashy. So fishy die because people likely dumping.
All right, so we'll close up our Q&A session with our contestant Chang Jung-uk from Tongyong Middle School. Jung-uk, thank you so much. Continuing on with the 2020 BeFM Youth English Speaking Competition, the grand final round for middle school students. We're going to continue on with our next presenter. We have up next Do Young-hoon from Busan International Middle School. Young-hoon, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, so you may begin.
Okay. Without a doubt, climate change is one of the biggest problems that humanity is currently facing. It is killing the planet and killing people as well. Unfortunately, many people don't know how to help. So I'll be writing and also talking about what we need to do to solve climate change. First of all, what is climate change? It is a long-term shift in the climate. Many climate changes have happened throughout the history of the world, such as the Ice Age. But now it is different. What many people think of now when they hear climate change is global warming. Many people think that climate change and global warming are the same things, but it's not. Climate change is simply the change of the climate, and global warming is the planet getting hotter. Technically, global warming is a part of climate change. Second, we need to know what causes climate change. One of the biggest causes of climate change is the emission of greenhouse gases, which are emitted because of us humans. Although many people are trying to reduce the emission, it is not effective in the reduction of the greenhouse gases due to the sheer amount of gas getting created is more than the number of people. Also, pollution such as plastic in the ocean, fine dust, and illegal landfills are other big reasons why climate change is happening. Third, we should know why solving climate change is harder than we think. As the world economy begins to grow, more people start using advanced tools and machines such as cars, air conditioners, and computers. Because more people are using these technologies, the amount of pollution that gets created is becoming larger and larger. So in order for us to stop climate change, we are able to simply think that the economic growth needs to be stopped. Of course, it is unlikely that rich countries will stop that. Why would they? It would only make these rich countries into poor ones. The developing countries will also never stop, because as stopping the growth means that they will become poorer. In addition, more and more people are being born as time passes. The human population will reach 10 billion people one day, and the amount of carbon dioxide, one of the greenhouse gases, will be seriously increased. The number of resources getting used up for them and the amount of trash that those 10 billion people will throw away will kill off Earth for good. So, unless the human population decreases, which won't happen in a long time, it will be almost impossible to solve climate change. Finally, we need to learn how to solve climate change. Although solving climate change, as mentioned earlier, is almost impossible, there are some ways. For example, the most obvious thing we can do is to recycle. Anyone can do that, as many people are also doing it right now. We can do other small but helpful things like turning off the lights when nobody is in the room, unplugging the cable when your device is fully charged, reducing the usage of traditional light bulbs, and buying eco-friendly products. By doing these things, we can reduce a lot of fossil fuel usage and the emission of greenhouse gases. Also, there are lots of programs that people can use to contribute to solving climate change. For example, Ecosia is a search engine that plants a tree for every 45 searches. A similar search engine called Ocean Hero removes a plastic bottle from the ocean every 5 searches. Things like those things can be the first step to many people in helping to solve climate change. To conclude, although solving climate change is very difficult because our economic growth is designed to go against it and the population is growing, we can try our best to help as much as we can by recycling, saving electricity, and using programs that contribute to helping the climate change. Thank you.
Young-woon, thank you so much. We're going to hand it over to our judges for our Q&A session with Young-woon. Judges, you have the floor.
I'll jump in here then. I'm interested in what you were saying about the need for the human population to decrease, Young-hoon. But what about Korea? What could happen in Korea if the population reduced even further? Because people are already worried in Korea that the population is declining too rapidly, and people are worried about the long-term effects on Korea. Do you really think it is reasonable for Koreans to reduce the number of births even further in this country?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because yeah, the birth problem thing is very serious in Korea, but the world population is just getting bigger and bigger. So, well, it's hard to say, but I think because our people, the population is kind of declining in Korea while the rest of the world is increasing, I think the other country, although we should also work on it, but I think the other countries that have higher, that are very increasing the population the countries that the population is increasing, I think they should be the ones who should be working on the problems.
I have a personal question.
Yes.
You mentioned the use of cars, air conditioners, computers, especially by people in rich or developed countries. So on a personal note, are you willing to give up air conditioning during the hot, humid Korean summers?
Well, I admit it will be hard to give up on air conditioning, but I will try hard to not use it as possible and use other stuff that are more eco-friendly.
Such as?
I guess fans are not eco-friendly, but they use much less electricity than air conditioners. And I also use the fans that you use it yourself, and it doesn't use any electricity at all. Also, I not use it as possible and just hold it until I can't it's too hot for me to handle. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Young-hoon. I found it quite interesting to hear about search engines that you mentioned. Could you elaborate a bit more?
So those search engines so every search you make, they earn a little bit of money, and with those money, the creators of the search engine, they donate the money to they donate the money to a tree planting place, and they donate a lot of money, and they also use eco-friendly things to not use as much carbon dioxide while the search engine is made, and so I'm sorry for doing this, but so to simplify, every time we search in that search engine, they earn profit, and they donate the profit to a tree planting or ocean trash removing people, and they remove the trash, plant trees, and yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Thank you for explaining. Can I have one more question?
Yeah.
Um, what are you doing in daily life in terms of your actions to mitigate climate?
So I try to walk as much as possible. Even though my where I live is a bit far from my school, and yes, I ride. So even though I ride, and it's almost impossible for me to walk over there, but I try to walk as much as possible, and I don't use plastic bags, and I always bring a bag when I buy stuff. Also, whenever my phone or whenever I turn off the TV, I unplug the charging device, because those will also use electricity even though it's full and the TV's turned off and stuff.
Are there any more questions? Are there any more questions from the judges?
I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Yeah.
All right, we're going to conclude our Q&A session with our contestant, To Young-hoon from Busan International Middle School. Young-hoon, thank you so much. Continuing on to our next contestant, also from Busan International Middle School, we have Kim Ji-kyum. Ji-kyum, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, so if you are ready, then you may begin.
There are lots of changes around the world, and when there are changes, there are always bad ones that comes along with good ones. Climate change is one of them. It came along to humanity after the beginning of the first industrial revolution. It is a great danger to us, just seeing how much damage it can give. Earth is like our body. Our body gets sick even with a fever of 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Earth, just like us, gets sick. If the temperature rise of 1 degree Celsius is enough to make glaciers melt, sea levels rise, and destroy biodiversity. Global warming is an example of climate change. Global warming happens because of the hole in the ozone layer, made mostly by the freon gas, also called the CFCs. The ozone layer blocks part of the ultraviolet rays that comes from the sun, but because of the puncture on some of it, harmful ultraviolet rays could enter Earth at full capacity. Another reason is the green gas effect. It is caused by carbon dioxide blocking most of the sunlight from getting reflected on the surface of Earth and going back into outer space. The trapped heat causes global warming. Plastics and vinyls also contributes to global warming. Burning plastics can emit harmful gases, and these gases can lead to green gas effect. Though we can reduce the amount of plastic and vinyl usage, we cannot stop using them. About 469,200 tons of vinyls were used in Korea just in 2017. If we stop using them, there will be lots of problems. So instead of terminating plastic, we should commercialize eco-friendly vinyl, which rots in 1 to 2 months and could be used as soil for plants. Climate changes are getting serious day by day. If we don't react fast enough, then every life on Earth will be in danger. We have a single mission, to protect and hand on the planet to the next generation, said François Hollande, President of France from 2012 to 2017. Then what is humanity doing to solve a global problem, climate change? There are international efforts to stop climate change. Paris Agreement, the First and Second World Climate Conference, and the IPCC are some of the examples. The Paris Agreement is a well-known effort signed by 195 countries around the world in 2016. Its purpose is to keep the global average temperature of no more than 2 degrees Celsius before industrialization. The World Climate Conference happened in 1919 in Geneva, Switzerland. The World Climate Conferences are a series of international discussion organized by the World Meteorological Organization, also called the WMO, about global climate issues, principally global warming, in addition to climate research and forecasting. IPCC is an abbreviation for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was created to provide policymakers with regular scientific assessments on climate change, its implications, and potential future risks, as well as to put forward adaptation and mitigation options. Then what can we do in our daily lives to stop climate change? We have to remember the 3 R's: reuse, reduce, and recycle. We should reuse the things that are clean and nearly new. We should reduce the use of disposable items. We should always recycle when we throw away trash. We can also be more efficient in using our resources and support some programs like Strawless Day. It was made to reduce the use of plastic straws, which 500 million of them are being consumed globally and every day. These are simple efforts that can have a gradual impact. Lastly, be informed. Know what is happening around you and speak up about it. Knowing is power. It is a potential energy that is stored in us. But knowledge without action is useless. Therefore, we should not only be aware about it, we must work to resolve it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Jigam. Now we're going to hand it off over to our judges for our Q&A session. Judges, ask away.
May I go first? So, Jiyum, in terms of the 3 R's, they reuse, reduce, and recycle. If you had to create some sort of campaign for you and your peers at school, what would you do to help maybe begin the campaign and to keep it going among your friends?
Maybe I could tell them the good part of the recycling things, and maybe I could show them how good it is by myself working hard to do those 3 R's first.
Thank you, Jigam. If I may jump in. You mentioned about several efforts at international level. Do you know how Korea is participating in those efforts? For example, in the Paris Agreement?
Yes, Korea is in the Paris Agreement, so South Korea is having an effort to lower the use of carbon dioxide, and it has been also in the news for some parts, yes.
You said, Ji Kyung, you said that we should notice what is happening around us and speak out. Can you give me an example of where you've done that with your own community?
Well, I have told my friends that when I was in elementary school about the problem about just throwing away trash in the floor, or they are like riding too much cars, or they are not recycling at all. They just throw away trash, just put it together. They're not having any efforts. So I have told them the importance of recycling and how the actions that we did, not knowing, could affect the climate of the globally, yes.
And how did your friends respond to you when you said those things, when you pointed out those things?
Well, some of them said maybe yes, they themselves could work, but some of them said like yes, they don't think that is true. Like they have a negative thinking about that.
Since you say that you've been trying to really, in daily life, practice things like recycling and such, so let me give you kind of like a quiz. So in terms of cup ramyeon, which is very popular among the entire population here in Korea, do you know how to properly dispose of it? Where is it supposed to go?
The way I know, you cannot recycle those because it is not clean. It has soup stains on it.
Sure.
So you should just throw it away. Like not recycle it, just put it together and then put it in the trash, not recycling.
Thank you.
I didn't know that about cup ramyun. Does that mean that we shouldn't be eating it?
I don't think you cannot eat those because I don't eat those a lot, but my friends does. So instead of stop eating those, we can maybe reduce the amount, and it is also not good for your health too. As also, so I think we should reduce instead of stop eating them.
Thanks.
Any more questions from our judges?
I'm good.
Thank you.
All right, so that's going to conclude our Q&A session with Kim Ji-kyum from Busan International Middle School. Ji-kyum, thank you so much. So continuing on, we have 3 more contestants to get to. I want to thank everybody, judges and our contestants, for your patience, especially our last 3 contestants who've been waiting quite a while to present of course, for their presentations. So without further ado, we're going to move on to our next contestant, Cho Hyun-sung from Shinjeong Middle School in Ulsan. Hyun-sung, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, Hyun-sung, you may begin.
Okay. Stating the obvious, climate change is one of the biggest problems we face. For the people who do not know what climate change is, it means a change to the global or regional climate pattern. There are 2 varieties of climate change. First, due to a large-scale change in the environment, it changes the global weather patterns. The second being more focused on human activities such as greenhouse gas transmissions, also known as GHG emissions. I will mainly address the second variant. We humans, starting from the industrial era in the 1800s to the current day, have produced more than enough greenhouse gas that nature can handle. Our nature can't filter CO2 faster than we generate it, making greenhouse gas stack in the atmosphere of our planet. This is the major cause of human-related climate change. As the sunlight passes through our atmosphere, it hits the surface of Earth. Then it's supposed to reflect back to space. However, the CO2 barrier prevents this, reflecting it back to Earth. This traps sunlight, making the planet gradually hotter. 3 degrees rising could be catastrophic, causing unpredicted natural disasters to occur. Now I will show you the devastating effects of climate change. Climate change has hit us hard in the back with its numerous natural disasters. Due to a rising global temperature, icebergs are melting, causing sea levels to rocket. Starting from the 1900s, an estimated amount of 21 centimeters has risen. This height is enough to destroy lower sea level and coastal areas. Since 1880, an average of 0.07 C has increased per decade. However, starting in 1981, the number almost tripled in size, resulting in a tremendous 0.18 C per decade. The number might be small, but don't underestimate. Africa is at its worst with droughts lasting up to years, worsening the current situation. Furthermore, Australia's coral reef system is also in danger. The rise in ocean temperature is a hazard to all living creatures in the ocean. Because of a sudden temperature rise, over 50% of corals have died. They have lost its vibrant colors, now left to die as gray corpses fill the ocean. But don't give up just yet. There are a plethora of ways you can do to save our current situation. I would like to mention a girl named Greta Sunberg. She was a Swedish student who had a passion to stop climate change for good. She began by protesting in front of the Sweden Parliament. She wanted the government to take stronger action on climate change. After she spoke at the 2018 UN Climate Change Conference, protests were happening on a global scale. After attending the 2019 UN Climate Action Summit, she was known as a leader to the public. She has been included in Time's 100 Most Influential People and won many awards. Now, all of this might sound overwhelming, but don't fear, small actions still can help the current situation. For example, try reducing your carbon footprint. Maybe take a bus or a bike instead of a car. Also, try to minimize the amount of energy you use. This results in power plants burning less fuel, therefore less CO2. So next time you see an unnecessary light or a power plug, turn it off. Climate change has to disappear to let the next generation flourish on a cleaner Earth. If you don't take action, climate change will destroy our planet with its catastrophes, demolishing every beauty of nature. Now you understand how much of a dilemma we live in and you know what to do. Then do it. Get yourself up and take action. Teach others what I've told you. It's time to make Earth great again for a better future. Thank you for listening.
Hyun-sung, thank you so much for your presentation. Without further ado, we're going to hand it over to our judges for our Q&A session with Hyun-sung. Judges, ask away.
You mentioned several impacts in the world of climate.
Yep.
Do you witness any impacts in Korea?
I did.
Okay, if you do, then could you take some examples?
So I live nearby the ocean, so when I look outside my window, there's like an ocean nearby. So I like to play in their sea. So like for last year, I put my foot in there and it was pretty cold. And now this year, when I put my foot in there, it's pretty hot. So I could like feel the temperature rise of a planet.
Thank you. I have a question for you. You mentioned the coral reefs in Australia,
Yep.
in the seas there.
Yes.
So for people who don't quite understand, why is it important to protect coral reefs? What benefit do coral reefs provide for us?
So many of the aquatic life in Australia likes to live in those coral reefs, like the fishes. And if the coral reef dies, those fishes have no home to return to. So they just die. Yeah.
Hi, Hyun-sung. What have you personally done? What has been your own personal contribution to climate change? You mentioned Greta Thunberg, for example. Would you like to be a Greta Thunberg yourself? Would you like to do that, what she's done? But what have you personally done, first of all?
I really like what Greta Thunberg did to save our planet, but I just started by, making changes to my, daily habits, like turning the lights off. Like when I'm brushing my teeth, I make sure to turn off the water. Like those small stuff can still help the planet.
Do you think that Korea needs a Greta Thunberg, someone like her, a young activist, to make the point to younger people?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay. Yeah, this is a very difficult issue, this particular one, but I'm trying to work out what more practical measures can be taken, to persuade people of climate change. Greta has been very effective in making people aware around the world, but she's also turned a lot of people off. There are a lot of people who are very skeptical about what she says. So I'm trying to think what would be the best possible approach, do you think, to persuading people? How do you persuade people in a gentle way, perhaps? Because sometimes she's accused of being too abrasive. How would you, persuade skeptical people?
You can never persuade all the people to believe that climate change is real. So I think they'll realize how bad the situation is when it gets worse, like the climate change gets worse and there's typhoons everywhere and those stuff, right? And they will go like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I should have listened. But yeah, I don't think there's an actual way to persuade those people. They will just keep believing that climate change isn't real unless they actually see it with their own eyes.
So in that case, do governments need to do more? If we can't convince ordinary people about it, the governments need to do more?
Yeah, we have to force them at least, make new laws that, help those people.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then that's going to wrap up our Q&A session with Hyun-sung, Cho Hyun-sung from Shinjang Middle School in Ulsan. Hyun-sung, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, continuing on, we have two more students to get to. Up next is Kim Min-seo from Busan International Middle School. Min-seo, are you ready for your presentation?
Yes, may I begin?
Of course, whenever you're ready.
People tend to neglect things that aren't seen by the human eye, things such as the climate crisis that we're facing. But now, it's time for people to confront the climate emergency. The wildfires, extreme weather, ecosystem failure, rising sea levels, diseases and disasters coming our way because of the climate crisis. We need to stop our war against nature, or else we will face the consequences. Stopping our war against nature means confronting change and impelling sustainable development. To achieve sustainable infrastructure, we'll have to change every aspect of our lives, perhaps starting from small things such as a new trend in the stock market. The reason why these changes are necessary is that the earth is the very foundation of our lives. Thus, mistreating it will provoke serious consequences. Some refuse to pay attention to this crisis, since nowadays our lives are more complex. Our lives depend on factors like the economy, society, and politics. That means our lives are not only about surviving, but about stability and convenience.
which makes it extremely hard for us to accept the reality of what's happening and change with flexibility. Then, how are people changing, and how do they need to change from now on? First of all, our leaders in the past few decades are a mirror of how the world has been acknowledging this crisis. It means that our leaders and politicians play a vital role and have a considerable influence on how the world views the climate crisis. While some have been on a steady ride towards an achievable goal, many others have had apathetic approaches. The Paris Agreement in 2015 proved that leaders have already delivered their first commitments, but recent events like the COVID-19 outbreak heavily affected our plans. Some use the pandemic as a push towards climate action, while others use it as an excuse for actively supporting the fossil fuel industry. We need people, leaders who are capable of achieving the same objectives using eco-friendly ways. Examples of climate action include South Korean President Moon Jae-in, who has also announced that South Korea will reach zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, joining the rest of the world in the race towards a goal of net zero. Net zero refers to a balance between carbon dioxide emissions and removal. Net zero is a common goal amongst world leaders approaching this crisis, seen as a more realistic solution. Aside from South Korea, many other countries have made a plan for carbon neutrality to eventually achieve the goals set in the Paris Agreement. However, there are still claims that some of the targets for climate action are too late. While leaders propose their plans for the climate crisis, it is needed for climate action to be taken quickly and as a top priority. Aside from world leaders and politicians, people are fighting for climate action on their own, in many other ways like peaceful protesting and implementing climate action in their lives. A representative example is the young climate activists. These people are taking part in climate action, seeing that it is crucially needed to protect their future. Take the Fridays for Future strikes as an example. Their protests are famous for youth protesting against lack of action. These gigantic movements throughout the world do make a big impact, but for society to overcome this climate crisis, our economic systems also need great advancements. There was a recent event that opened the path for our economy to start moving towards an eco-friendly future. In 2018, William D. Nordhaus was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. He wrote a paper on how our economy will change as global warming develops further. The design, named the DICE model, emphasizes that the optimal path is to invest in mitigation technology, but states investing in low-carbon technology may result in a loss of GDP. Such research on economic change means that it will be safer for politicians and leaders to take a step towards climate action. The next few years will decide how the climate will change. It is needed more than ever to prioritize the basic needs for life on Earth, not only profit in the short term. We are at the tipping point of a crisis. It's time to treat it as one. Now is when we will decide whether we will develop further or face disaster. It's time to act. Thank you for listening.
Minza, thank you so much for your presentation. Judges, you have the floor to ask questions.
May I go first? So thank you for speaking on carbon neutrality. And of course, you also mentioned the Paris Agreement. What would you say to leaders? Because I noticed you mentioned leaders and politicians quite a bit in your talk. What would you say to leaders like, for example, sitting President, US President Donald Trump, who actually withdrew the US from the Paris Agreement, who is very much a skeptic of climate change? So what would you say to a leader like him?
I would tell them that climate change is very serious and it is happening, and that we need to have a view of the future, not only profit in the short term. Profit is a great value that is very much important in our modern day society. But for us to achieve sustainable infrastructure, we'll have to have an eye out for the future, not only not only just profit in the short term again.
And speaking of leaders, as a follow-up, you mentioned South Korean President Moon Jae-in, and that South Korea has a goal for 2050 to reach carbon neutrality. Do you think that we're on the right path? Meaning, do you think we can really get there by 2050?
As I have mentioned before in my speech, South Korean President Moon Jae-in has announced a Green New Deal in Korea that is investing in companies that eco-friendly companies and so on. I think that if we really push those countries, if we push those companies to help achieving the goal of carbon neutrality, I think that we can get there in a few years. Yes.
Thank you.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Sure.
Based upon the questions. I see that you're emphasizing the importance of actions from the companies to reach the carbon neutrality goal. Why do you think they are maybe one of the most important actors in solving this problem?
I think that companies have a great role that in the stock market. It's really interesting because the stock market has a big role to play in our modern day society. Some examples include Bitcoin, a stock market crash, or everyday ups and downs in the stock market that impact our daily lives. The ups and downs in the stock market depends on what people are interested in and what intrigues the people. And I think that's a great, it really impacts what people think about this crisis. And as mentioned before, I think it'll impact leaders like Donald Trump who really value the stock market and values and profit.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, apart from the Green New Deal that President Moon Jae-in has been pushing, what other things do you think he should be doing that he isn't doing at the moment? Can you give some suggestions of what government should be doing to address this war against nature?
I think that we need to advertise to the people what is happening and what we are doing. I'm surprised that even though there is a global crisis going on, not a lot of my peers and leaders are focusing and regarding this issue as a top priority. I think that's the issue of advertising this crisis. For example, whenever I see an advertisement for donations, I see polar bears and icebergs melting, and that is true. That is a big part. That is a big fraction of what is happening. But for people to get motivated to donations or taking part in climate action, I think that we need to change our way of advertising so that people know that they themselves are in danger, not only the species of animals that are going extinct every day.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so once again, that was our Q&A session with contestant Kim Min-seo from Busan International Middle School. Min-seo, thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to our final contestant of our middle school competition, Lee Ga-young. Ga-young, thank you so much for all your patience. I'm sure you've been waiting quite a while. So if you are ready, we can begin your presentation.
Yes, I'm ready, but a little bit nervous. Okay. Yeah, I will start. Okay. Hi, my name is Ga-young Lee from Shinju Middle School. It gives me a great pleasure to be here at this competition. I hope you are all having a good time. Today, I would like to talk about the climate crisis and the potential that lies in using biomass energy to combat it. So, what is the climate crisis? Simply put, it refers to global warming and climate change. I am pretty sure that most people know what these are from their education in schools. However, how many people recognize the real seriousness of impact that the climate crisis has on our planet? Due to global warming, many regions have experienced acute drought, resulting in food shortages. Due to climate change, the number of natural disasters, such as floods or tsunamis, has doubled in the past 20 years. As a result, more than 260,000 people have died, and the world has suffered with an economic loss of $222 billion. These figures deliver one message. It is time to take your eyes off the textbook and move forward now. Well, there are many contributors to the climate crisis. However, it is clear that increasing carbon dioxide levels contributes significantly to the climate crisis. It is important to ask then, what is the biggest contributor to carbon dioxide production? The answer is intensive fossil fuel usage. This means the world should seek to use eco-friendly energy that produces less carbon dioxide as an alternative source of energy. One such source is biomass energy. Biomass energy is sustainable energy generated by living or once living creatures. So far, there have been 3 generations of biomasses that are commercially viable. They are crops, trees, and microalgae, respectively. There are 2 advantages to using biomass energy. First, it is a carbon-neutral resource, while fossil fuels are one of the biggest contributors to increasing carbon dioxide levels. Biomass energy does not increase carbon emissions. How? Carbon dioxide is consumed when the plants for biomass energies are grown. Afterward, when we convert the plants into biofuels, carbon dioxide is then produced. Thereby, these 2 processes balance each other out, and we can conclude that the overall carbon dioxide produced is 0. As a result, biomass energy can be used without contributing to environmental issues such as air pollution. Furthermore, fossil fuels are limited resources that will be soon exhausted entirely. However, biomass energy is renewable and sustainable. It will not be depleted over time, as the crops and trees used to generate biofuels can be easily replanted and grow relatively fast. Overall, biomass energy can be regarded as an eco-friendly alternative to manage the climate crisis. However, biomass energy has also drawbacks. It cannot be utilized equally in all countries due to geographical limitations. Therefore, biomass energy might not be the best option for all countries. However, 3rd-generation biomasses using microalgae and does not require intensive areas of land to utilize. Taking into consideration that it is an ongoing process with technological advances happening each day, it is sure that biomass energy can help most countries by providing more clean energy sources for countries to use. Overall, we can say that biomass energy is the best way to counter the disadvantages that can be seen in using fossil fuels. As such, biomass energy should be promoted to all countries in the world to solve one of the fundamental factors of the climate crisis. It is for me and it is for you, and ultimately it is for us. Idly worrying about global warming and climate change simply cannot work anymore. The climate crisis is happening to me, you, and all of us. Finally, I would like to leave you with the words, knowledge must come through action. Thank you for listening.
And thank you so much for your presentation. We're going to move on to our Q&A session with our judges. Judges, you have the floor.
Let's jump in perhaps first. I'm not very knowledgeable about biomass energy. So could you explain it to me in a way that I'll be able to understand clearly? Give me some examples of biomass energy, please, and define it.
For example, there are crops and trees or microalgae, respectively, and biomass, like using plants, especially plants or living things or once living things, like oils or plants, as I said. We can make energy, like convert to energy of them using like oils or like burn it like that way, and it has a lot of advantages because it is like natural energy sources. Yeah.
How dominant do you think Korea is, or how good is Korea at producing biomass energy? Are you happy with the progress in Korea?
Well, I don't think that Korea have a lot of processes with growing biomasses, because the most developed biomass are crops. But yeah, you know, Korea has 70% of landscapes with mountains, so it is hard to grow a lot of crops. So I was a bit worried that Korea might not have some advantages with some biomasses about economic parts. However, I found that microalgae, and it is especially grown with some oceans or with water, places with having water. But Korea has 3 parts of ocean, so I think that if we develop the technologies, because we are having a lot of processes with science, so I hope, and I'm a bit encouraging about the developing the biomasses in Korea.
Okay, thank you very much, Ga-young.
To the whole biomass energy, I've heard that it's quite costly compared to other sources, developing other sources of energy. So, Ga-young, what would you say to the skeptics who do worry about the economics, the viability of biomass energy?
Actually, I think that biomass energy is the best alternative energy compared to other alternative energies like solar or wind or like hydrogen energy, because it is economic than other energies, because wind or solar power depends on weather conditions, so it might have some disadvantages with energy, and hydrogen energy has some lot of disadvantages with explosion, because it has a lot of reactions for chemistry things. So I think compared to them, the biomass energy is safe, and it is commercially viable than other resources. So it is also economic, as I think, not expert, but.
Thank you, Ga-young. You've touched upon the differences in terms of the situation that countries are facing in terms of using biomass. But when it comes to biomass issue, it's always a question or debate that's going on, like in terms of the competition between food and energy use. How would you address that question?
Well, I think that it won't be a problem, because there's 3 generations, as I explained. First is crop, and it is the problem that, crops, especially using corns. Corns are the most used or eaten crop that in the world. So it has become a lot of problem and issues with that. But developing sciences, we have some 2nd and 3rd generation that we can't eat. We don't eat trees or microalgae. So I think it won't be a problem anymore developing trees and microalgae, or maybe 4th or 5th generation by developing our science and processes with biomass energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question for you, Ga-young. Well, you talked about biomass energy. That was like the bulk of your what you were speaking about. But what about some everyday, solutions, like from you, from us? What can we do to really fight this climate crisis?
Well, I think we should have some conscious mind with fossil fuel usage. Well, why I thought with biomass energy is knowing about the real dangerousness or seriousness of impact with fossil fuels. So I think we should know, or we should educate it with some fossil fuel usage and the dangers of climate crisis. And also I think that we should donate a lot of some organizations like NGO, like Greenpeace, or a lot of environmental organizations, and like more like any other student said, like turn off the light, or reducing uses of water. Yeah, like that way, I think we should have some little processes with in our daily life. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's going to conclude our Q&A session with our contestant Lee Ga-young from Shinju Middle School in Yangsan, Gyeongsang. Thank you so much. And that's going to conclude the presentation portion of the 2020 BeFM Youth English Speaking Competition, the middle school grand final round. A big thank you to all of our contestants, putting in a lot of preparation, and it really shows in your presentations. Now, we're going to give the judges some time to score our contestants. So we're going to give the judges 15 minutes. So for all students, I would say I would stand by to hear the results of the presentations in about 15 minutes. So yeah, we'll give our judges some time to score the contestants. All right, looks like we have all the contestants back with us. Thank you so much for your patience. The judges have been working hard to score your presentations. Now, before we announce today's winners, we're going to take some time and have the judges give a little bit of their feedback, what they thought of the presentations overall. So we're going to first start with our judge, Miss An Hye-jin. If you could share with our students, our contestants, a bit about your overall general impressions of the presentations.
Thank you, everyone, for your passionate presentations and patience having participating in this contest. And overall, I would congratulate everyone to make it to the final round and express your ability to deliver your messages in English, and especially in terms of the actions that we need as a global citizen to combat climate crisis altogether. And it was very interesting to me to hear different ideas and also like how you would react and how you would talk to your peers to persuade them, and how you see the roles of different stakeholders in the society. And I would encourage to go further and think further to contribute to our common cause, climate crisis, especially now that Korea has committed to go carbon neutral by 2050. I encourage you to act more and talk more around yourself as future consumer and as consumer currently as well, but also future voters and just students as well. Thank you very much for the Busan영어방송 for having me and having this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Once again, one of our judges, Ms. An Hye-jin, head of WWF Korea's Climate Energy Program. Up next, we're going to have our judge, Professor Derek McGovern, share a bit about his impressions with our contestants' speeches. Professor?
Thank you very much, everybody. I know how difficult it is to do something like this. I mean, I speak Italian, but I would not be comfortable giving a presentation in Italian for a topic as difficult as this. So I think you're all geniuses to be able to do this. Even if you don't win today, you should be extremely proud that you've been able to get this far and to really impress us with your passion and sincerity, your knowledge of this topic. I can't emphasize it enough that the fact that you can do this is amazing in a second language. And I was very impressed. I was thinking about that constantly. And I personally learned a lot from what you were talking about today. I really did. Just in terms of tips that I could give you with delivery, perhaps, and my own fault is I'm often a very fast speaker. And I've learned a lot from watching people who are good speakers about pausing at the right moment, not to the tendency is to sort of rush everything, but to pause and to try and make your points when you want to make a particularly strong point, to pause for a moment or to give it that extra clarity. And using the intonation is very important. What is it? Olgyang is very important. So sometimes when you're nervous, people tend to speak very fast and it becomes a little bit robotic. So think about how you speak, record yourself, listen for the intonation, the natural up and down, the rising and falling, and concentrate also on the pauses. Because if you speak too fast, for example, you don't give the audience enough time to reflect on what you're saying. Eye contact is really important, and I was very impressed with the speakers who did that. Be careful not to over practice hand gestures or things like that, because that can come off as insincere, even though you're not insincere. I was very impressed, by the way, with the vocabulary people were using. You know, I thought you were all very articulate. I think the hardest part is to deal with questions, how to answer questions. And it's very difficult because you're having to listen intently in a nerve-wracking situation. And I thought that many of you did extremely well with the questions. But the hardest thing is to listen, because we are nervous in this sort of situation. So if you can focus on listening, really listening to what the questioner is saying, and trying to do justice to the answer. Yeah, no, great stuff. Very, very impressive. Hope that made sense.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Yeah.
Now we're hearing from our third judge, Catherine Bang, a professor at Tongji University as well, host of Morning Wave in Busan, a program here at BeFM.
Well, first and foremost, I have to say, we as adults have so much to learn from you, the young people. So thank you for inspiring all of us, not just with your fabulous English skills, but, with your passion and sincerity. I felt like, we could really feel it. And in terms of some tips I can give you, as a person who's like on the radio every day, if you want to sound sincere without sounding like you're reading, you really have to know what you wrote, like in and out, like really. And it's not just practicing it, like you have to really mean it. So that would be tip number one. Also, as Professor McGovern was talking about intonation, that's really important. So you don't want to drone on like a robot or go too fast. But if you want to pinpoint some really important points to have an impact, you have to kind of slow down at the important parts, slow down a little bit. And then, if for the other parts, it's kind of like music. You can't just go at the same tempo throughout the entire talk. And lastly, for some of the students, I would say, writing and speaking are two completely different beasts. So I would say things like tips, look up pronunciation. I mean, in any language, you can't know the pronunciation for every single word in that language. So I would say, if you're not sure, I look it up, right? And to practice things like that. Otherwise, I would have to say, during this whole pandemic, the fact that we're having this online, I'm sure you guys were super nervous, but you guys did a great job. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to the announcement of the winners of today's event. So the first award that's going to be given out is the runner-up prize. Now, the runner-up prize award winner will be given a certificate as well as a trophy, a runner-up a trophy, and given a scholarship, awarded a scholarship of 200,000 won. So the award for the runner-up prize goes to Lee Ka-young, first grader at Shinjung Middle School. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Ka-young.
Oh my God! Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Moving on to the second award that will be handed out is the first prize award. This award is going to include a certificate as well as a trophy, and will be awarded a scholarship of 300,000 won. So the first prize award goes to Elizabeth Kim, 8th grader of Busan Foreign School. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Well
Elizabeth.
done.
Good job.
축하합니다.
And now, the final prize of today's competition. The final prize award winner will be given a certificate, a trophy, as well as a scholarship of 500,000 won. And the award for the grand prize of the 2020 BeFM Youth English Speaking Contest goes to Kim Min-seo, first grader at Busan International Middle School. Min-seo, congratulations.
Okay.
Bravo.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Min-seo.
Speechless.
I'm a bit embarrassed. But congratulations. And once again, thank you so much to all the judges and to all the students that participated in today's event. To me personally, just hearing everybody's presentations, I was so encouraged to see just how well-informed and just how passionate the youth, the younger generation of our city and of our nation is on just protecting our earth and issues such as climate change. So a big thank you to, once again, all the contestants, a big thank you to all three of our judges. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on our program. And that's going to conclude the 2020 BeFM Youth English Speaking Contest. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.